If anybody's followed Sandler sales, they have this old saying in the Sandler methodology that sales is a stage play put on by a psychiatrist. And I would say your organization is a stage play put on by a psychiatrist.
Today we have the sales boss himself, Jonathan Whistman. And Jonathan's the CEO of Who Hire and Perception Predict AI. He wrote the Bible on sales management in his book, SalesBoss.
This might sound brutal, but I would hire two and fire one. Because if I hire two people, right, I at least have a good sense, if one of them is doing well, that we're on the right path. And if I lose one, I'm not all the way back to zero.
Today we're going to dive into the best practices of growing and managing your sales team. And we're going to dive into the future of predictive hiring.
Welcome to the Zeroed In Podcast. I'm your host, John Lallande, a seasoned real estate investment expert and former Marine recon sniper. This podcast is designed for those seeking effective strategies to increase revenue growth through strategic hiring, leadership, and effective tracking. Our focus here is clear and direct. We provide actionable insights from successful founders and growth experts. Whether you're establishing a new business or aiming to scale an existing one, our episodes offer the essential advice you need for practical business growth. Lock and load, zero in, and get ready to scale.
Welcome to the Zeroed In Podcast. Today we have the sales boss himself, Jonathan Whistman, and Jonathan's the CEO of Who Hire and Perception Predict AI. He wrote the Bible on sales management in his book, SalesBoss. And today we're going to dive into the best practices of growing and managing your sales team. And we're going to dive into the future of predictive hiring. I'm really excited about that topic. Jonathan and I got to talk yesterday for about an hour due to a power outage. So we had a podcast. We didn't get to record it. But Jonathan, welcome again to the Zeroed In Podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, John, I'm excited for our conversation today. And especially after yesterday, even though we didn't capture it fully, I think we had a great brainstorm session on both sides.
Definitely. So round two. So I hope we get to talk about SalesBoss, but after talking yesterday about your company, talking about Perception Predict AI, why don't you just start out with talking about how did you find the company? From what I understand, you acquired the company, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I came in as a partner, so I still have the original founding partners, but I was actually speaking based on the SalesBoss at a conference in Florida, a sales conference, and a gal came up to me after the conference and she said, I think these assessment providers, like Myers-Briggs, DISC, all those where they do introversion, extroversion, PI is an example of that. She said, I think these companies have it all wrong. I think what, owners really care about is, can they hire somebody and will that person perform at the top end of their team? And how long will they stay around? So you can get a return on all the investment you put in training and that sort of thing. And I thought, well, that's true. And how are you doing things differently? And what she had done differently is interesting, and I'll share it with you. But long story short, great story on her part. She grew up in Taiwan, literally in a rice paddy, no running water, no electricity. First of her family to go to college, and she's an amazing thinker, data scientist, and she had tinkered with how do we take this whole body of scientific knowledge about what makes us up as humans and then put it in practical tools that hiring managers can use inside of their companies.
And those are attributes, right? Which are different than personality traits.
Yeah. So, at a very high level, how she does it, when you think about something like a PI or a DISC, it's really based on the big 5 personality traits. It was a science that was developed 30 years ago, very well researched and actually really helpful. Like, how do people respond to the environments around them? It's a blend of like introversion, extroversion. And then some of those assessments bring in things like cognitive intelligence. And then what are you interested in? With the theory that if you're interested in it, you'll probably stick with it longer. But when you look at the data that's come out of research institutions, there's this whole massive area of things that are stable about humans that you can measure reliably online. We're basically just big data engines ourselves as humans. And so she had created questionnaires. So we have 400 plus stable human attributes. And so when we start inside of an industry or with a particular company, we're assessing hundreds and thousands of people that are doing the job today. So if you can imagine, just for sake of something, all your audience, we've all bought cars. So we get a car salesman, right?
Yeah.
if you think about assessing thousands of car salespeople and getting this really rich, what are the attributes that make up people that decide to go into selling cars? People that do it well, people that do it poorly, people that give salespeople a bad name as car salespeople. So she gets this really rich pool of attribute data. And then on the other side, those companies give us actual performance data. How many cars did they sell? What was their average margin? When did they start? How quick did they churn out? And we're basically building a machine learning engine that sits between those that says which of these attributes cause people to succeed at the highest level? Which of these attributes and in what measure cause people to sort of get mid-level performance? Which mix of attributes cause people to churn out really quickly, maybe within the first 90 days? And so then we operationalize that for auto dealers. So candidates come in, they apply, we give them a 15-minute or so assessment, and then our engine is guessing how long will that person stay around if you hire them, and more importantly, where will they be on your sales team? Will they sell 50 cars a month? Will they sell 20 cars a month? Or will they never sell a car?
And what I found really interesting is the more data you have, the better, obviously. So you can do this with a specific company and say, hey, they will last this long and they will do this well with this company. And this profile does really well with this industry as well, and this may be in this type of job, right? So do you have attributes that across the board, you notice they work really well for salespeople, right? Just salespeople in general. Or would you say that's too broad?
Yeah, I would say it's too broad because even inside the world of selling, right, you have transactional selling, you have sales where you're having to self-generate your leads and grind it out. You have sales where you're really doing consultative sales where you're having to develop a relationship over many months or years. You have sales where you're selling to a committee. So, I think broadly speaking, there's probably some attributes that come into play, but really hesitant to have a human identify that as a trait in their mind. Because you see this creep up in the hiring process. If you've hired a number of salespeople, you sort of develop your own shorthand of what you like or don't like in a salesperson. And it can actually lead you wrong. You might say, I hear people say, well, how do you select salespeople? Well, if they played a competitive sport growing up, and if they, there's all they have this sort of this heuristic that they use, a shorthand to get to an answer. And most of the time it's completely wrong. They just label that, right, as the thing. I'll give you an example. We did, and I think we talked about this yesterday. We did a blueprint, a performance blueprint is what we call it, for cleaning companies. So we had a large cleaning organization that's hiring a lot of janitors, and they want to know how long is somebody going to stay? How will they perform? It's very high turnover. Yeah. And one of the things that came out of all of the data was that the more sincere a cleaner is, the faster they churn out of the organization. Which, if you think about a human sitting in the interview, if I was interviewing you for a cleaning position, the more sincere you are, I'd be, I like John. He's going to fit well on the team. He's easy to get along with. And that's going to actually cause me to hire you for the wrong thing.
One of the things that you said yesterday that blew my mind was just because someone is introvert or extroverted doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a better salesperson. And you explained it as if you broke out extroverted people and introverted people into two different groups. Okay, you might have the majority of salespeople are going to be in that extroverted groups, but some of the top performers are going to be in that introverted group as well. So can you explain, like, when you looked at this data, because you might have thought the same thing, especially a lot of people these days use culture index, predictive index, and you always hear, hey, if you want a salesperson, right, the B, the sociability needs to be to the right, or DISC, your I needs to be high.
Yeah.
Why is that not necessarily true?
Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever had a salesperson that is so outgoing and social that they rely on, sort of charm and the ability to build a relationship to close the deal?
100% yes.
Right?
Yes.
Rather than really digging in and understanding what your problem is and taking an intellectual approach to helping you fix the problem. You also find, on the sort of DI, very extroverted people, they're not really that organized, right? Like they flip from one thing to another. Their fuel comes from being with people. Well, on the other side, if you have somebody that is very orderly, likes process, you might think of them as a C on the DISC style, or an S where they're very sensitive to the relationship. They want to guard the relationship. Those people sometimes do way better at sales because they once they learn a process, they follow the process flawlessly, right? And they don't rely upon their good looks and charm in order to get the deal done. So it's sort of that, yes, true, if you just, hard line said more of the population, if I looked in the extroverts, I'm probably going to find more people in sales. That's true. But you're going to overlook the person who's an introvert, but very intelligent. If you put them in that sales roles, they might be 20 times better than somebody on the other side. So in the absence of any tool, yeah, PI is great. And organizations that use it, they absolutely see some improvement. But part of that improvement, and I would say this is true even with our tool, part of the improvement is a placebo effect, meaning if the problem people have with hiring is sometimes they're running through the hiring process really quickly. And if you put an assessment in the process, it's going to, just by nature of having it there, cause you to slow down, take a second look, have conversations with your leadership team. And just that process of slowing down will, as a byproduct, cause you to make better hires. So it's great. But if you are interested in real data and science, once you get past that's what I would call superficial, you want to really dig deep and gain the advantage. I want to be able to get somebody that's sort of that diamond in the rough that nobody else would spot, be able to spot them, bring them on my team. The nice thing is, and I'm just going to use sort of DISC module because I think most of your viewers will be familiar, right, with introverts, extroverts, that sort of thing. If I hire somebody that's a DI, they're extroverted, they're always looking for the next new challenge, I'm going to bring them into my organization and, maybe they do sell, but I also know that unless I can keep promoting them and unless I can keep changing their environment, they're going to get tired, they're going to get bored, and they're going to churn out of my organization. Because part of the thrill for an I is new. Part of the thrill for a D is challenge, right? And so when they get really good at it, they bore of it. It's like, oh, I got to do this. I'm good at it, but it just doesn't turn me on anymore. You get somebody that's SC, they love mastery. They hate change. So if they've put the effort in to master something, they're going to stay around forever. That's how to build a great organization.
That's so interesting that you say that, because before this conversation, if you would have said, hey, give me a DI and give me an SC, who's going to burn out faster? I'm going to say, obviously, the SC is going to burn out faster. They don't want to talk to people if they have to talk to people. But if you think about it, salespeople are known to hop, right? To job hop. Yeah. And they like it. They get excited. They do really well. I'm over this. Let's go to the next thing. You're saying, but there's not a correlation between longevity and extroversionist or introversionist.
Yeah, and if there is any correlation, I think people over-index on it. So the reality is what you need to put in place for your sales team, and I talk about this in the SalesBoss, is rhythms, right? So I liken a sales team to a jazz club. Right. And so a jazz club has a certain rhythm. It has a certain energy. It has a look and a feel. And you can walk by the outdoor of a jazz club. And even if you're not in the mood, if you love jazz music, you're like, oh, maybe I'll stop for a little bit. And you'll be inside and pretty soon you're tapping your foot and, next thing you know, you're ordering a cocktail and then it's 2 a.m. and they're asking you to leave. That's what you have to build in your sales team. If you've systematized your sales organization, you can bring in somebody that's like an SC that you have to have a process to tell them when they're doing well, because that's what they need in order to thrive. Once they get that rhythm, though, they're going to do it endlessly. They're going to follow the plan. A DI, they're the gunslinger. They want to come in, they want to figure it out. I would say you need both. There was a book, and I usually, because I'm an author, I like to credit people, but I genuinely don't remember where I first heard this, but it stuck with me for a long time. It's the difference between, do you want to hire a rock star on your team or a superstar on your team?
Is that the sales acceleration formula?
Yeah, it could be. I just don't remember. But there's the difference. The superstar sort of wants to move on. They're always wanting the new challenge. And then you have the people that just want to master their craft. They want to be known for that thing. So it's an interesting way to think about people in your team. But our system for the Who Hire is designed completely around helping organizations, one, be able to predict how somebody's going to do in that role and understand the data, because I believe that if you own a business, you have intellectual property, right? Your sales process is intellectual property. How you do things is intellectual property. What causes people to stick and stay in your organization and what causes them to churn out is also your intellectual property. You should really learn what it is in your selling environment that causes people to do well and what causes them to churn out.
Because it costs you money. So, and I did some math. Every organization is different. You maybe have data on this for bigger organizations, but I noticed for us, for a salesperson and acquisitions manager, we're going to typically get up to where we're spending about $20,000 a month on that rep. And we really need like 4 good months before we even can tell if they're going to stay or not, or if they're going to be good. And so that's $80,000 that we're spending, that if we make that bad hire, that's $80,000. That's what that cost my company to make that bad hire.
Yeah.
It was an $80,000 mistake. And I'm sure for me, with a smaller company, I can't imagine what it costs these bigger companies that are investing more in their sales reps to make a bad hire. And you could tell me there's probably some numbers behind that.
In my book, I talk about the hiring process, right? The interview and that sort of thing. And I say one of the mindsets you want to be in is at each stage of the hiring, you do an interview. I want you to go into that interview with the thought that if I say yes to the next stage for this applicant, I have to write a $500,000 check out of my personal account. Mm-hmm. Because really that's what it's going to cost you. If it's $100,000 to hire and train them and put them in place, and then the missed opportunities if you don't hire them. So it's a massive cost. But what's interesting is most organizations don't track it. So almost everything else ends up on a P&L and it gets assigned to somebody, right? That's an operational expense. This is a sales expense. Turnover almost never ends up with somebody being responsible for the cost of that bad decision. And even more important, if you're a small organization. So I wrote the SalesBoss around, larger organizations and putting into process. I think it's equally applicable with a small organization. But if you only have 2 salespeople or 3 or 4, 1 or 2 bad hires is 50% of your revenue.
Yeah.
Right. So it becomes critical that you make that great decision on the front end.
Yeah, and it's the most difficult hire, I think, is the 0 to 1. Right? Your first hire.
Why would you say it's your most difficult hire?
Well, this is why I believe that can be the most difficult, is you don't have anyone to compare it to. So what do most good sales reps ask during the interviewing process? How many other people are there? What's the top guy doing? Right? That's usually what I'll hear a good sales rep ask, is they'll say, hey, what's the top guy making? Because they want to know if they can beat it. They want to know what's realistic. And when you're just starting, you don't have any baseline. Like we were talking about yesterday, you've got whoever the CEO, whoever the owner of the company that's done the sales for the company, you've got what they've done, but there's no telling that a new sales rep's going to be able to come in and do that. And so you have to find creative ways, like you said, to create a new unique value proposition. And I'd really like to talk about that for a second, because you brought up so many good points when we spoke yesterday about creating a UVP that's a unique value proposition when you're a younger company. And you don't have sales reps that are making $150,000, $200K a year. You have to sell the vision a different way. So for those people that are making their first hire, how do they do that? Yeah.
So if I back up just a little bit, and I like that perspective you gave me, because I do think you're competing against other companies, right? Where there's more of a history, it's a safer bet for the salesperson. So that's true. And we'll talk about that. But the other reason is your head trash as an owner and hiring the first person, it's easy to feel like they're doing you a favor if they come work for you. So you start it not with the idea of how do I keep them off of my team, right? A fraud. You tend to right early on be selling them and pitching them. And then when somebody says yes, you're like, oh, thank goodness they said yes to me.
Yeah.
Because you just don't have that experience. So when you're young, it's hire number 1, hire number 2, 3. You really have to control your own head trash and put yourself in that mental state of knowing your numbers. And I would say if you don't know your numbers, if you haven't had the tracking your numbers, your metrics, your conversion rate as the owner doing the sales, if you haven't been doing that, you shouldn't be hiring a salesperson. Unless you can't sell at all. And then you shouldn't be selling a salesperson and paying them on commission. You should be paying somebody what they're worth in the marketplace for them to gather the right conversion metrics so that you can hire people and say, here's what my metrics are. Like, I think it's dishonest to hire somebody on commission if you have no clue what the conversion rate is. Because your company could suck, your materials could suck, your pitch could suck. And it has nothing to really do with that poor salesperson that you've brought in, right? You're putting them, and they're helping you, cook your meal. So if you're early and you know your kitchen's a mess, you should hire somebody that's very experienced, but their role is, and the way you pitch it to them is, I need somebody that can come in. I'm going to pay you the $200K a year or whatever it is, $150K. And your output is going to be able to track our metrics and our conversion to help us identify what's going wrong. That's a different position than hiring sales reps. But let's assume that you've got your metrics figured out for the most part. It doesn't have to be perfect. The second thing I would encourage is that you never hire one salesperson. Always hire in twos. And the reason I'm going to hire in twos, and I'm going to try to get them started as close as possible together, is because if I only hire one, I have no idea if they suck or my process for bringing them in and training them sucks. But if I hire two people, right, I at least have a good sense if one of them is doing well, that we're on the right path. And if I lose one, I'm not all the way back to zero. So I would actually, even if I can only afford to hire one, and this might sound brutal, but I would hire two and fire one quickly, right? Like if I had to do that in order to keep, because otherwise I'm losing ground. If I hire one, I'm gonna fall in love with that person. I'm going to hire them. I'm going to be grateful they're coming to work for me. And then I'm going to do a slow, agonizing death. I'm going to go, well, maybe if I give them one more month, or, I've already invested 3 months. What's one more month? This is the month they're going to make the turn. So always hire in twos. And then secondly, to get to your question, how do you have a unique proposition? In a young company, they're buying you as much as they're buying the paycheck that they can earn working for you. Right. So it's true. You may not get the veteran in the industry that's already knocking it out of the park and knows they can make $200, $300, $500, $1 million a year in commission. What you can do is you can take somebody that has all of the actions necessary. So in my book, I use BOSS, BOSS, behavior, outlook, skill, stature. Those are the 4 sort of criteria for measuring success. And it always starts at the B. So what's the behavior to be successful working for my company? So it's not the quality of it, but it might be things like they've got to pick up the phone, they got to make a certain amount of dials, they have to be able to do an in-person visit. What am I actually having them do, right? And then what's the outlook they have to have? And when I talk about outlook, it's their view of themselves, the view of the marketplace, all of those sort of things. So what I might try to do is you're in your business, right? You're buying homes, right?
Yep.
So I may not be able to bring in the $200,000 a year earner that's buying homes because they know they can go elsewhere. But what I can do is I can look at an adjacent marketplace where somebody has to do the behavior I need them to do. So they need to be able to dial the phone. And I can reach in and grab somebody that's in a marketplace where they can't currently earn $200,000. I can say, look, you can come for me. I'm going to teach you this business. And as a result of teaching you this business, you're entering a marketplace where you can earn millions.
Yeah.
So you're sort of getting them at so knowing where to hunt and where you have the best potential to be able to hire people.
I love that. And then yesterday, when you brought up the head trash, and we didn't get to dive into the head trash yesterday, but what we did talk about is I really liked how you were talking about putting your actor hat on, right? So you said, I'm not normally this way, but when I am a sales manager and I'm looking for hires, I put on my hat, I can't let any imposters into this organization. And that allows me to look at the prospect and act differently. So
yeah, if anybody's followed Sandler sales, they have this old saying in the Sandler methodology that sales is a stage play put on by a psychiatrist. And I would say your organization is a stage play put on by a psychiatrist. You think when you go to a physical theater and the curtains open up, the music, the lighting, where the stage sets are, all of that's been designed to elicit a certain reaction from the audience, right? And when you have a stage play that you love, that moves you, it goes through all of the emotions, right? From sadness to joy to humor, that's what makes a great experience. If you're an actor and you come on that stage, you are just playing a role. And your role is to move the audience in a certain way, to elicit a certain reaction, to move the storyline forward. So what does that relate to you as an owner, especially as you're growing your organization, or if you're the sales boss, you're leading the team? Just know what role you're playing in the moment. It doesn't actually have to be you off stage. Right now, I'm playing the role of an interviewer whose job it is to screen and keep an imposter off my team. That's my role. I can put that hat on and do that. If I'm going into a sales meeting and my role is to be the thermostat, right? And I raise and lower the temperature. I just put on a hat and I play that role for the hour for my meeting. Then I can go back to my office and be me. And that's going to allow you the flexibility to have the impact that you need to have on your team.
Can you dive into that a little bit? Because I thought it was so good to talk about our friend Ren Bartlett, right? Who is just a phenomenal sales manager.
He's a beast.
He's a beast. And so he allowed me to go hop on one of his team meetings. And in Jonathan's book, he talked about you're a good, well-oiled sales machine is similar to being in a symphony, right? Or I think you compared it to
a jazz club.
Some jazz club, right? Where everything's humming, and I never fully understood it. I remember reading that part of the book, kind of going, okay, I could kind of visualize it. You talked about the leaderboard, in the office and things like that. And I was like, I could visualize this, but I had a hard time bringing that to my team. And then I watched Ren do it, and he's just an orchestra, right? It's phenomenal. So I tried to bring it back to my team. And what I found is I kept going. I was the thermostat, and I kept lowering my energy with my team. If somebody was having an off day, I could feel it. I would pick up on it, and then I would settle into that, right?
So in that case, I would say you're the thermometer.
I was a thermometer. And
you went in, you go up 70. So I'm 70. If you put a thermometer in, it doesn't matter what temperature the thermometer is, you put it in warm water, it's going to equal out to that temperature. Put it in cold water, right? And the job is to be the thermostat. I go in, it's too cold, I turn it up. It's too hot, I turn it down. I talk about in my book, things are good or bad by comparison. And what do I mean by that? Every human, when we're judging how we feel or how we think about something, we have some standard in mind. Right. So I remember when I first started renting a car when I would travel, I loved renting a car because even if I got a Toyota Camry, I was like, this is so much better than my piece of junk that I had. Right. And now I hate every rental car because my standard has changed. If your job is to know for every single person on your team, where did their standard for great come from? But why I'm mentioning this now is I've worked with sales leaders who think they're great because they have never experienced the magic of being on a team like Ren's. Mm-hmm. When you walk into a high-performing team, it is so magical that it looks effortless. Like there is this magic dance that's going on between the leadership team and the salespeople and the delivery team. And out of that, just every month comes revenue and it seems flawless, but it's not flawless. It comes from a really well orchestrated plan. So what is the well orchestrated plan? Let's go back to a jazz club. You think about, when you go into a jazz club, every detail is situated. The lighting, the house music in between sets, right? The material that the booths are made of, all of that, the smell, it's designed to elicit and put you in a certain mood. When you get the house band that's up playing, they'll bring in a visiting musician. And that visiting musician draws a crowd and they can bring their personality and flair and they can play over the top of the music and then they land right in harmony with the house band. But they can do that because there's a beat, there's the rat-a-tat-tat, and there's the boom, boom bass drum. As a sales leader, you get to design all of that. And most sales leaders leave it to accident. So if you probably saw this when you went into Ren's team. He starts the meeting the same way every time. The team knows this is the way it happens. And there's an energy level, and then they role play, and then and that whole thing has been designed to get people to operate at a level that they wouldn't be inclined to do otherwise. And when you start doing that, you start seeing, you bring a team together, and if you have really good rhythm, you can actually stop your rhythm as the leader, and they're going to keep carrying on because they know the tune. Right. And that's the magic is it starts happening. And in fact, when you don't do it, the team's like, what happened? What's falling apart? They get worried. Mm-hmm. But if you haven't seen someone do it, it's sort of hard. So I would recommend to your listeners, if most people get into sales leadership as a salesperson, I would say 99% of salespeople coming up, even if they're really good, have never been on an all-star sales leadership team. So you should go out, visit other people in your industry and other industries and say, hey, can I come observe you, lead your team and listen to your meetings and the way you do that? And you're going to come across people that are so far above what you ever imagined was possible.
It's a terminology they use. It's the energy. Everybody kind of, not that they're acting the exact same, but they just, like you said, it's a rhythm, right? Yeah. And so they're all grateful. They're excited to be there in the morning, and that morning meeting sets the tempo for the rest of the day. They're excited. They know what they have to get up. They have to do. They know what they're going to get after, and I can see why that creates the results.
Yeah, one of the I have 5 truths about humans. One is things are good or bad by comparison, right? So. you have to realize what is good or bad for each member on your team. Like, what is good income for your salesperson? Like, you may think, oh, I got to earn 300K. I got to earn $500,000. And they may be thinking, hey, if I made 70 grand a year, I'm wealthy, because everybody around them and their family earns $60,000 a year or less. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of research around, everybody has a set point for what they think of success. And it's usually when they're doing 10 or 15% better than the people they hang out with or they grew up with.
Yep.
Right. And so that's their good or bad by comparison. So you have to know that. The second truth about humans is humans love autopilot. And you think about when you're like driving a car. Have you ever come back, from traveling somewhere and you get in a car and all of a sudden you're home and you don't remember any of that trip? Like, you don't remember stopping at the stoplights, who is next to you. And we can do, if you tried to tell someone every little step, how do you get from the airport to your home? It'll be almost impossible to do it. Like, put this much pressure on the accelerator, turn to 2 degrees here. Like, it would be impossible. But our minds do that on autopilot, and we're changing the radio station, and we're doing everything else. Humans love autopilot. And the reason we love autopilot is it allows us to do other things. So your job when you're designing your sales organization is, how do I put my team on autopilot when it serves the team to be on autopilot? And how do I pull them off autopilot so that they're paying attention and doing something different? So if you take that same trip from the airport to home, right, that you do on autopilot, this time though, you pull out of the airport and you look in your rearview mirror and you see a white car with blue and red lights on the top of it. Like, you come off autopilot, right? And you're like, oh, did I buckle my seatbelt? Am I going the right speed? And you come off autopilot because somebody's in a position to judge how well I'm doing. So when you're thinking about your organization, like you look at Ren's team, there's a autopilot. When they get into that meeting, everybody knows they're going to do role playing. Everybody knows they have to bring the fire and the energy. Everybody has a check-in rhythm. So sacred rhythms, you get what you ask people to do. So one thing I know, Ren, maybe I'm assuming he still does it, but last time I sat in his room, it's exactly out of my book. It's a check-in for the meeting. Mm-hmm. So if you go into a sales meeting, your salesperson to your left, as a leader, you don't even tell them to start. They have a script they go through. So it is, my goal for the year is X. Last week I made X number of calls. Right now I'm on Y. Here's my revenue, right? And they just do a check-in. And when they're done, nobody says great or bad or critical or pat on the back. It's just a check-in, and you go all the way around the room. And then the meeting starts. As the leader, I get to design what's in that script. So I may use one script for 6 months when I'm really trying to get the team to focus on a certain metric, and then I switch it up because I want them to focus on something else. This accomplishes a couple of things. One is, if I have a check-in metric, that is, I have to say where I'm at year to date, week to date, how many calls I made, etc. One, my salesperson, who is disorganized, he's probably an I because I hired an I. Mm-hmm. They have to at least go into the CRM and look and go, hey, where am I at?
Yeah.
Right? And what did I do last week? And now that's a behavior. They have to, because they're not going to show up and not know. Mm-hmm. Right? The other thing it allows them to do is they get to listen to everybody else check in. And when they hear the third person down from them give their thing, and if they're getting beat in the moment, they're going to go, maybe I suck, but I don't want to suck as bad as that guy. Why am I behind? And they're going to work harder the next week. Or they may be patting themselves on the back for, the amount of activity they've done. And then when they hear someone else, they're like, wow, they're double my activity. It's no wonder that their sales number is double mine. Because what happens if you just put people's sales results up? If you're the lower salesperson, you're letting yourself off the hook. You're like, well, they got better leads this month. They did, like, you attribute it to luck. You don't attribute it to the fact that they outworked you. Their skill level's higher than you. But when you do that check-in, you're allowing your team to sort of get a glimpse of what drives results. And I'm not ever saying, hey, great job, John, on that, or, oh, you need to step up your activity. Not in that setting. I'm just letting people check in. It's peer pressure. They want to fit into that group, and they're going to self-develop themselves. That's a rhythm now in your organization. You've just taken one of your duties off the plate.
It also helps them become aware of their actual numbers, because if they have a KPI that they can hit and they're not reading it every day, some companies don't even have their team read their KPIs every day.
I've went into organizations and asked the sales leader, hey, what's the goal for the month? And the sales leader can't tell you. And when I ask the sales rep, what's the expectation here or there? They're like, oh, I don't know. Let me look it up. Or I say, hey, how's your comp plan structured? How do you get paid? Oh, well, I get paid a base and a commission on this. Well, great. Tell me how your commission's calculated. Where are you at for the month? They have no idea.
Yeah. That's insane.
Right.
And so being able to at least say it, verbalize it every single day. You hold yourself accountable because you know that every day, hey, I'm going to have to say my numbers in front of everybody else. And so it adds just another layer of accountability.
Yeah, it's why if you get in a fitness program and you're there with a group and you're doing weekly or daily check-ins, you tend to eat cleaner. You're right. You don't cheat. You make sure you hit the gym. It's just, you're leveraging human behavior. But you get sales leaders who are lazy. If you're a sales boss, you're operating at the top 1% of sales leadership, and that means you're leveraging every advantage you have. You're using the latest, greatest scientific tools to hire people on the front end. You're using everything you know about human psychology to drive results on a daily basis to get full activity from your team. You understand how do people discover that they belong. You know, I grew up in a cult, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time here talking about it, but people will do crazy things to be a part of a group.
Yeah.
Right. And that's another truth about human behaviors is people need to belong. Notice I didn't say they want to belong. They need to belong. Their identity comes to belonging. So as a sales leader, you're setting a standard that says the way you belong here is by doing these things. And then the sort of last thing about human behaviors is the truth about humans is the only reason that matters is their reason. So, you know, if I'm talking about a dollar number or a sales, most sales leaders talk about it from their perspective. But if I'm a sales boss, I'm actually connecting that revenue to something that's important to my salesperson. And more importantly, when they fall short, that I want them to realize what are they losing as a result of them allowing themselves to fall short. So I'm a big fan of using interest calculators for compounding interest, because I talk about if somebody has a sales, you know, what's possible in a month, and I usually use it as in terms of what's required, right? What's our standard? Or I use the best person on the team. Let's say they earned $10,000 in commission this month, or 20,000. Let's go with 20,000. So they earned 20,000 in commission this month. The next person below them earned 15. But that's a $5,000 gap. The person in second place isn't going to lose a lot of sleep about that 5,000 unless you help them appreciate what that 5,000 means over time. Lost commission is like unfilled hotel rooms. Meaning if the hotel room doesn't sell you know, that night, right? That's why they lower the price, because they can't go back and sell a night sleep into the future. So I want to take that $5,000 difference between the, you know, number 2 guy and the number 1 guy, and I'm going to put it in an interest calculator. I'm going to say, what happens if you were able to, you know, you're going to live on the money you made, but that extra 5, you could have invested it. Let's just put it in for 3 years. What does that mean in the future? What did you actually lose this month by not closing that gap? It's a much bigger number, and you've got to help them make it real. And
yeah.
Right. And having that conversation. And then I'm going to ask the question. I'm going to say, John, is it that so-and-so is so much better than you and you can't get there? Or what's the difference? Because most people say, no, there's no difference, right? No, I'm as good as they are. Or, yes, they're better than me. Great. Where are they better than you? Like, the only question is, like, are they so much better that you can never get there? And I've yet to run across a salesperson that doesn't believe they can be at the top. So I want to leverage that belief to say, how much longer will it take you to close that $5,000 gap? Because that's the amount that this education is going to cost you. Because right now you're in the education period because you're not in number 1.
What I love that you preach, and just to kind of echo what you're saying, is a lot of sales managers will say, hey, look, you're not hitting your numbers. This guy is. What's the problem? Why you don't want to make money, right? Like you're just lazy. What is it? You are, or worse, they'll say, don't you know what the company expectation is? And it's all about the company.
Yeah.
Where what you teach is building trust with your reps to where you understand what drives them, and you can make it real. So I like how you said, I'm going to make it real for them. Because that $5,000, if it just showed up on a piece of paper on a commission check, does nothing for them. But like you said, what could that $5,000 do for you? For example, I have one of my reps right now, and I did an exercise with him where I said, okay, what do you want to make, right? Aside from what the company, you know, what you're required to make here, what do you want to make? And so we did the conversions. Okay, so you need to make this many dials, attend this many appointments, and convert this at this rate to make that amount of money. And then we took that off the table and said, what would that do for you? And for him, he wants to buy rental properties because he wants to have passive income. He wants to be able to retire and he wants to be able to retire before 63, right? He wants to retire in his early 50s. And so when I'm talking to him, I'm not talking about, this is multiple reps that have had this same goal. I'm not always talking about, hey, you haven't hit your KPI and that's a company standard. It's, hey, you want to hit this, right? Because you want to create this passive income. In order to do that, what needs to change from what you're doing now? And they'll think about it. They'll think about it differently than if I just said, hey, go hit the numbers because I want to.
That's great. And I would maybe even click down 1 degree deeper than that, which is,
okay,
I want to know, if I'm sitting with you, I'm going to have a conversation that sounds like, John, who's the wealthiest person you know, like on an intimate level? What do you like about their life? What do you don't like about their life? What do you suppose they earn?
Interesting.
Right? So I'm just getting them to visualize what that is. How did it take them? What did it take them to get there? John, because if you ask somebody how much money do you want to make, they're going to say, I want to make as much money as I can. That's not real, right? It's not real to them. Everyone wants to make as much money. There's a difference between having a goal and being committed to a goal. Right. So if you'd ask people, do you want to be healthy? They'll say yes, but not everybody gets up and goes to the gym. They don't, they reach for the extra slice of pie. You have to make it so real to them. So if I said, John, describe to me what your financial life or lifestyle what do you want that to be in 5 years?
Yeah. And they're going to say, let's say they say, well, I want to have XYZ coming in passively, so that way I'm not stressing about just hitting my bare necessities.
Yeah. So what does that take? Are you do you visualize yourself being in the home that you're in today? If you're single, do you visualize yourself being married? Do you have kids? Right? Like really get them to articulate in their mind what great is, because it doesn't matter to me what great is to them. What I want to know is what is great. Like if great to them can be accomplished on $120,000 a year, they're never going to get much above $120,000 a year, because human nature is, if we're starving, we're going to eat. We're going to find a way to eat. But when we're stuffed or we're satiated, we're going to stop. So where is their hunger level? So the question then becomes, how do I stretch their view of what's possible? I remember the first time I walked into a 3,500 square foot home and I thought I was walking into a mansion. I just didn't realize people live like that. Now it seems stupid, right? Because I've seen how people live. But at the time, that was my point of comparison. So if you're going to bring somebody in your team, we tend to think that they think like we think, and they don't. I need to know what is their standard of great across all of those things, right? People think, oh, I'm a great husband, until they see a great husband.
Yep.
And then they're like, dang, I've been slacking, right? And we tend to let ourselves off the hook. So that's what I call rolling up your sleeves and really getting into the grit on a personal level with people that you bring on your team. I ought to be able to describe for each person on my team, what does winning look like to them? Because now I can motivate them. And I've done that with plenty of salespeople when I work with them. I say, look, you said in 2 years you wanted to do this. If every month between now and then is the same as the month you turned in today, you're not going to get there. Are you okay with that?
And the more real you can make it, the more they're going to be motivated to actually hit those goals.
Yeah.
And all the way to the point, we were talking about Matt Ryder a little bit. He had this video where he spoke about basically future pacing himself. So he had a goal of, I don't know the exact numbers, but call it a $5 million house. He lives in Australia, right? On the water. He drives a supercar. His wife drives a Range Rover. And so what he did is he went and rented a house. He rented the car and went through a day of, hey, this is what that would feel like. So then it's real for him. Yeah. And I did that exact same thing, right? I did that, and he lives in a $10 million house now and probably has multiple supercars. Yeah. And so, when I heard that, I went and did the exact same thing. I went and found the exact street that I want to live on in San Clemente with the $20 million house, right? And lived it. And when you live it, you're like, okay, people are living like this. This is a reality, and I can make it. I just have to do this, and this.
And when you get around the people that are doing that, you realize they're not that much different than you are. And secondly, sometimes they're not even half as talented.
Yeah.
The difference is they've applied themselves in one or two things. The danger that you might run into with that approach, and I would still use that approach, is that not everyone will admit that they are motivated by material things. And you'll hear them let themselves off the hook by saying, well, I'm just not really motivated by a great car or a great house. And that could be true.
Okay.
Right? What is motivating them, and what is their view towards money? Right? They may have developed a viewpoint from childhood that money's the root of all sorts of evil. Mm-hmm. right? And the reality is, while they've been telling themselves, I want to make a lot of money or I want to have the reality is they're actually comfortable just a few degrees above where they're at. Like if they're paying their monthly obligations, the wolves aren't always at the door. They're comfortable because that's a default mode for many, many people. And I wouldn't say it's actually a negative thing. What I try to look for, if you talked about attributes of a successful salesperson, what I look for, and I actually don't measure this in my survey because I don't think there's a great psychographic tool to do it yet, is I want somebody that I call a happy discontent. So I want somebody that's generally speaking in their life, they're happy. Right where they're at today. They're enjoying life. They're grateful. If you ask them how their day's going, they're not critical. They're not living in unhappiness, but they're discontent. Meaning there's some gnawing at them that always is like things could be better. It's not that they're unhappy. So they're not, because I hate I don't want to work around somebody that's miserable, right? Like I could be living in a 700 square foot house. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to also be discontent because I know, hey, I want a little more space here. I traveled in an RV. I was happy to be in that small space, but I don't want to do it for, does that make sense? So happy 100%. Discontent. How do I find somebody that's genuinely happy, but they just have this discontent knowing that there's more out there, they're purposed for more.
I love that.
And then if you can get them, John, and goes back to like, how do you get your first couple of salespeople? If you can get that person to see you as a path for itching the discontent, they're going to follow you as a leader, right? Because I believe people will stay with you and work with your organization as long as they believe they can, working for you, still do the best work of their life. The moment that's not true, they're going to start moving on.
So if you have, let's say you don't have perception predict, and you want to identify attributes in someone by asking them questions. So can you give an example of a couple of attributes that, let's say if you're just looking for home services that you found that have helped people in the home services industry, what kind of question would you ask to identify an attribute?
You know what? There's a whole list of them in my book, by the way. So you could go there and look at a bunch of those types of screening types of questions. What I'm looking for when I'm engaged with somebody, it's actually not an answer to a question. And I'm going to go right around salespeople. I am looking for mental flexibility, curiosity, and then that discontent. So how do they speak? How well do they, how flexible are they in thoughts? Like you and I yesterday when we were just chatting, and you could feel an energy, right? Like I could, right? And I know, and it got me going to the next level, and then we'd go down another rabbit hole. And that's the sort of thing that you want when you're hiring somebody. You want somebody that has the mental flexibility to just sort of dive in and go there. And then the next thing that I'm looking for is how do they handle criticism? So if I'm going to help somebody get better quickly, I need to be able to have really transparent conversations with them. So are they self-aware, and in the way they see the world, can they separate their identity, like who they are as a person, from their role? And can I be critical of their role and they're still okay over here? Because I'm going to be critical about their role, and I'm hoping they will be, right? It's like a star athlete is hunger for the criticism. They watch game tape. They want somebody to say, see, when you step back on your foot that way and you put the weight there, this is the problem. You need to do it, right? And then there's a person that's not the star athlete that just wants to be patted on the back and say, great game.
Yeah.
So all of my questions are sort of around that. They're more organic. How do they speak about the lessons that they've learned? And that comes out in natural conversation. I do have one interview that I've introduced because I wrote my book about 5 years ago now. I have one more interview that I've mastered since then that's not in the book, which I'll share with your listeners, which is I call it the Columbo interview. I'm probably dating myself now because it was an old show, the Columbo, where somebody just acted dumb. But the way this works is you get all the way to the end of the hiring process, right? And you say, hey, John, I have one more person I want you to go have lunch with. And so maybe you're having them have lunch with me, right? I call your person. I'm like, I don't know. John wants me to go have lunch with you. I guess he trusts my opinion. He's already decided he wants to hire you. And like, he's in love with you. Like, you've got this thing in the bag. Why don't we just go get lunch, have a good time? You tell him you enjoyed talking to me. I'll tell him I enjoyed talking to you. And, good luck working for me. He's a great company. I'm going to go have lunch with a person, and in that meeting, they're not going to think that they're on an interview because I've already told them, look, I'm not interviewing you. John's already decided he's going to hire you. I just need you to tell him I'm a great guy. I'm going to tell him you're a great guy. What you're going to find out on that interview is the real reason they left their last job, the real reason they struggle with, what they really think about their future. There's no scripted answers there. And then I can sort of fact check that against everything they told you in the interview.
Wow. How would you do that virtually?
Well, you could do it virtually. You just have to say, so, and I've done this for my clients. You just say, if you were interviewing me, say, hey, John, I'm really excited about putting you to work on my team. I think, and I'm just going to stroke, because now I'm in the romance interview, right? And then the romance interview is in my book. So I have the screening interview, a performance interview, a pressure interview. Those are in my book. So I've done all that. I've decided I want to hire you. So I do the romance interview. This is where I need you to fall in love with me and how great the future is going to be. Now I'm not trying to keep you off the team. I'm trying to keep you on the team. And they'll say, hey, just one more thing. One of my good friends and mentors that I've always relied on their opinion. They're a great judge of people. And regardless, I'd love for you to meet them. I'm just going to connect you with a Zoom call. Would that be fine? And they're going to say, yes, you connect them via email. But your instruction to your interviewer, not the employee that you're trying to hire, you have them email one-on-one. So I would just email the person. I say, Zach, I'll make time for you on Zoom. The reality, I don't know why John, he's a good judge of character on his own. I could tell he's already decided he's going to hire you. Let's just jump on for 15 minutes and,
shoot the shit.
Shoot the shit. You'll tell him I'm a great guy and, I'm sure you're a great guy. And let's just check this box so you can move on. Then when I get on the call, it's probably going to be more than 15 minutes, but that's where I'm going to hear all that. But the Columbo effect is sort of I'm not quizzing. Like I don't act like I'm interviewing. So I'm just like, oh yeah, you still have to be careful because you are formally doing an interview. So there are some things just from an HR perspective, you're really not,
right.
technically supposed to be asking here. So, but what I can ask that person is they're going to self-share a lot of things. And, I can say, hey, so what excites you about this? What got you in the industry? I'm curious. What did you work before? John said you worked at, oh yeah. They're going to share all of the horror stories. They just will, because they've already believed they got the job.
All the resistance is down.
Yeah. And they already think they have the job. But now what you have to be prepared for, when I do this for my clients and I play the bad guy, right? Sometimes I'm like, never hire this guy. So they're coming into that lunch meeting with me thinking they have the job all sealed up. And so when they don't get it, guess who they blame?
Oh, they blame you.
They blame me. And you'll be getting that call like, I don't know who this guy is you had me go to lunch with. Like, he was a complete retard. It's just like,
yeah.
Right? They trash talk you because they know that's what lost them the deal. So you just have to be prepared for that.
So one of the questions I had for you, and I'm really curious about this because what I noticed, I have a really easy time doing the pressure interview when the candidate, I don't actually believe in them that much. Mm-hmm. But sometimes, and I'm so guilty of this, is when I'm like, oh, this is a good candidate, I cheap out on the pressure interview. I'm like, I'm scared to do it because if I scare them away, I just lost a great candidate, right? And so...
Have you ever been wrong?
Oh, yeah, most of the time.
Okay, so just remind yourself that you've been wrong.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
What do you tell people that are thinking the same thing? They're like, oh, this guy, you know what? This guy's, I already know he's going to be great. I don't need to do a pressure interview.
Yeah, if you get it right 100% of the time, you have my permission to skip the interview. But the reality is you've been fooled before.
Yeah, of course.
So what I would do is I would put in my mind the person I thought was going to be a superstar that broke my heart and wasted my money. And I'm going to go into the interview with that. And I'm also going to give a trap. So as an example, it's super easy. If you have some people, it's hard to put pressure on them. Like, so I'm trying to remember if this is in my book or not. It's bad. You could just, you say you're sitting in your conference room. You can just have the person, you can say, hey, John, I'm just curious. Do you mind grabbing let's whiteboard some things. They'll go, great. They'll stand up. They'll get out the board. Just write me the 5 things you think are absolutely most critical from a salesperson's point of view to be successful. Like what causes them when they fail? Why do they fail? Just like top 5 or 10, whatever it wants. And I'm just going to be quiet. They're going to go write all of those things on the board. And you're going to really see people's true personality in that. Some of them will talk the whole time. Some will be nervous. Some will be like, you're going to see a bunch of stuff. I don't really care what they write on the board. When they get to the whole board, I'm going to look at it. I'm going to look at I'm just struggling, John. How come number 4, blah, 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 isn't like number 1 or 2? And you're going to really see some pressure, right? Because now I haven't been rude. But you're going to see how do they respond under pressure when the prospect challenges them. Like What you really want is somebody that's going to use humor and to be like, well, to be honest, it probably could be one or two, but the reason I didn't put it there is XYZ.
Yeah.
Right? And they're gonna keep the rapport, and they're not going to view it as right. Because if I get this person on my team and I'm going to coach him, we're going to have disagreements about how things should have been done and would have been done, right? And I want them to be okay. Your great person in that scenario will use a little humor, and they'll be like, "Well, I guess I just screwed the interview. Does that mean I'm not hired?" And we'll laugh, and then they'll say, "I guess I could have put it there. The reason I put it there is I had an example back in my past. I did whatever." They'll tell a story, and if they can tell a story, not break a sweat, like that's the person I'm looking for. So if you need a couple of like tools in your tool belt that when you know you're going to chicken out and you're not going to go there and you're not going to do the pressure, like you don't let yourself out of the interview until you've used at least 2 or 3 of the tools that you have in your tool belt.
Yeah. The one I've struggled with is at the end, right? Right at the end when you want them to objection handle you. Because I've gone too far and I've said something along the lines of, hey, I don't think you have what it takes to make it here. Mm-hmm. And I think that was too far.
Yeah.
That was almost insulting. And then I think I've gone too soft too, where I've said like, hey, I'm not entirely convinced. Can you maybe give me some reasons why you feel like you should make it here? And maybe that's too much of a laydown. So where's that like perfect balance of when you're trying to get them to...
I think you know it when you're there.
Yeah.
It's tricky because I never advocate for being an ass to somebody. They're a human. So what I want them to have to do is they infer that I'm being hard on them rather than I'm actually being hard on them. Right? And there's a difference. So I'll just give you an example. You've asked somebody a question and they give you an answer. And I might say, John, if I'm being truthful with you, most of the time when I hear people say, and then I'm going to repeat back what they say, a lot of times that's an excuse for something else they failed to do. So I haven't said, I think you're going to fail. I don't think you can make it here.
Yeah.
Because I can't come back from that. Like, imagine you're on a date with a girl. You probably can't. Like, if you say, I don't think this is ever going to work out, like, you're just not going to come back from it, right?
Exactly.
But I could say on a date with a girl, I could say, in my past relationships, when I've heard a girl say something like that, what it's actually ended up being is why, blah, 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 blah. And then if I pause, like, she can get all bent out of shape about it. And I'm going to be like, wow, I dodged a bullet. Or she could laugh and say, well, that's not the case with me. What actually happened was blah, 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 blah. And now and that's what I'm really looking for, right? Mm-hmm. Is how did they handle a pressure interview is about how do they handle the pressure. And I would also say that if you find yourself genuinely liking and having a hard time putting pressure on somebody, that's actually a good sign. As long as because that's what you want. That's what you want with a prospect. But the only way that works is if you can be authentically truthful with yourself, that you're going into it with the mindset that I'm going to try to keep them off the team. I'm not trying to win them a spot on my team.
Yeah.
Right? Because when I'm doing a screening interview, it's the same way. I try to be really fast in the screening interview. And then if I find myself wanting to extend that screening interview to 30 minutes, then I'm like, okay, well, they won me over.
Yeah.
Good for them.
And guys, if you struggle with this, like Jonathan spoke to me about this yesterday because I told him about some of the struggles that I'm having in my business, with keeping the energy levels high because I'm not always rah-rah, right? And I love what you told me about, hey, sometimes you just need to put the actor hat on, right? Yep. So you need to put the hat on that I am keeping imposters out of my business. Or my job right now is to show up and be that thermostat for my sales team. Or find a way to keep the rhythm going without, a lot of rah-rah. Like you said, you're not necessarily a rah-rah guy, but you can keep the tempo going with a good sales team. Yeah. So you have to find that art. And I just wanted to make sure I reiterate that because I think a lot of people listening to this can go, man, this is just not me. Like, I'm just not that type of person that could ask those types of questions. And it is a limiting belief, and you can teach yourself to do it.
The question is, are you asking your salespeople to learn a script and a style? You are. If you're running a good sales team. Now, that doesn't mean you're scripting every word they say, but you do have episodes in your sales process, right? Where you're saying, first we're going to do this, and then we're going to lead them down here, and we're going to ask questions, and we're going to qualify or disqualify, and we're going to, you give them that whole process. And you expect a salesperson to come in, and even if it's not their natural process they followed in the past, you're going to expect them to learn yours and follow it. So you need to do the same thing with yourself. There is a process for hiring high quality salespeople, and you should follow it. Unless you have 100% winning it, if you're knocking it out of the park, you could ignore everything I've said.
Yeah.
Like if it's working, good for you.
Yeah.
When you have a salesperson on your team, this is another mindset that I'd love to leave the listeners with is even if I hire a superstar on my team, I tell them my expectation is that they are going to imitate before they innovate. Right? Which means they will learn my process and they'll do the things the way our company does it. Yes, they can bring their style and personality because that's why I'm hiring them, but we have a rhythm. And they're going to do that until they beat all my numbers. Now they can innovate, right? So like, and I would just say, like my sales process, we have a 75% close rate. When you consistently beat 75% close rate, doing it with imitation, you can feel free to innovate. I'll be all ears. But until you hit that 75%, I don't really want to hear it.
Yeah. I love that. So if somebody wants to learn more about Perception Predict AI, maybe they have a company, right?
Yeah.
How do they find out more about you? Where can they learn about you? Can you talk about the audience that you serve for people that are looking for help? They need the help hiring.
Yeah, I would say the easiest way to get a hold of me is John, Jon, at whohire.com. You could probably put it in the show notes. My book, The SalesBoss, is a great way to get a hold of me. And those are probably the two key ways of interacting with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about who are you normally helping out with Perception Predict and Who Hire? Who are the companies? What's their size? Right? If someone's interested, do you have packages for people that are just starting out, like a basic package, or do you need to be enterprise level? What does that look like?
Yeah, no, we work with small organizations. Anybody that's trying to hire, they're going to use our Who Hire system. In that, it's a fully functional ATS, applicant tracking system. So everything from helping you write the job ad to putting it out in Indeed and social media, screening that candidate, right, all the way through to hired. That happens inside our technology package. Our low end package for that is $4.99 a month. So even if you're a solo operator, you can have access to a ton of data and just get on. And it's not just technology. When you sign up, you meet with my team. They're going to help you. They're going to help you make sure that your job ads and all of that are running. So it's just a software play. Perception Predict is that same prediction model, but it's our large enterprise companies, right? And those companies are spending hundreds of $1,000s, and we're creating custom models for them to do that. On the SalesBoss side, doing sales coaching, consulting, that sort of thing, I don't really engage much with organizations on that at this point, other than, getting on podcasts and sharing my experience there. I take on maybe 2 or 3 clients a year, and the size doesn't matter. It actually has to be, I really love the person, and what they're trying to accomplish, or I like the industry and I'm geeking out about the industry. And so I want to play in that space. But that's sort of how I treat the SalesBoss stuff now.
All right. Well, if you guys haven't read SalesBoss and you are hiring salespeople, it is the Bible, right? You have to go read SalesBoss. So I was lucky enough to be handed the book from my coach, who lives and dies by it, and he got his company. I mean, this guy just builds company after company. So grew another company to $10 million in 2 years.
Yeah, I would say if somebody uses the SalesBoss, not just for hiring, but as a blueprint for all the structure in a sales organization, like they will be unstoppable. The reason I use the term the sales boss is one, who wants to manage? Like if I call it the sales management, it'd be like,
no one would buy it.
No one would buy it. I don't want to manage people. I don't want to be managed. If somebody's asking me how I'm doing, I say, I'm managing. It's boring. But if you say I'm doing it like a boss, right? It's like I got style and flair. But a sales boss is a sales leader operating at the top 1%. Like these are magicians. And if you haven't, I have a checklist at the end of the book. The checklist by itself will change your life. If you think you're good, I would challenge your listeners. If you think you're a stud, like you got this, you're the best. You go through that checklist. I guarantee you, in most cases, you're going to get less than 50% of them where you would feel comfortable rating yourself at the top of your game.
I'm one of those people that thought I was good.
Yeah.
And I realized I have a lot of work
But
to
it's
do,
just things are good or bad by comparison. When I wrote the book, I had the opportunity to be on the inside of a lot of high-performing teams and a lot of low-performing teams. And when you get that snapshot of what great looks like, you then have a different point of comparison. Every sales leader I've ever worked with thinks they're great. Mm-hmm. Even if they say, I know I have room for improvement. I'm all open to coaching. Like when I really dig into the guts, they think they're great. And they're just waiting for me to to sort of say, yeah, you got it going on. Challenge yourself, look at the whole checklist at the end of the book, and then you tell yourself whether you're great or not.
I love it. Guys, john@whohire.com. I'll put his email in the show notes.
Yeah, and I'm a John like you, Jon.
Exactly, the right type of
The
John.
right type of John.
No wasting letters here. And we'll also put the link to Perception Predict AI as well. If anything, just go check it out. Go look at the demo just to see what the future of predictive hiring is. If you're anything like me, you're going to nerd out about it, and it's really, really fascinating. So, Jonathan, thank you again for coming on. This is the Zeroed In Podcast, and we are signing off.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.